far, a lot of the videos on my channel have alluded to just a bit that I really want to do a review on New Getter Robo, because no one has really done it properly. The closest we have is the Mr. Cheese section in his Getter Retrospect, which you should go watch. It's a really good video. However, it did leave some stuff to be desired, as he had to keep it spoiler-free. But no one since then has really talked about this show in video form. I decided I wanted to do a spoiler review that covers everything, until I came to a roadblock that, oh, reviews are fucking hard because of structure. I still didn't want to discard an entire new video because, well, it's my favorite anime of all time, and I kept vaguely mentioning Getter every single video I got to, and I probably will continue this bit because it's funny. I knew I had to do something for this show, just maybe not a full-on review. So, I decided I'm not going to review the entire thing for the sake of my sanity and perfectionism. Instead, I decided that I'm going to talk about the part of the show that defines New's identity, the Heian arc. This part is probably the craziest moment in the entire show. Well, besides everything that happened in episode 9 and just the final moments of the show, it's truly the moment that New found its identity of being more than just a weird reboot of the original Getter manga. But it's also the most unexpected plot twist in the entire series, which says a lot because the major plot twist in the manga is that this is a cosmic horror, and all of Armageddon just feels like an Indian drama. So if I had to narrow it down to one thing, yeah, this arc deserves an entire video compared to the rest of the series. I will say I will eventually talk about stuff from episode 9 onwards, but in this video it's going to be kept very brief. I especially think Heian, the way it was written, reflects a lot of the strengths and weaknesses the show has as a whole. So I guess in one way it is a review, just not of everything. The spoiler warning I will give is that the first 5 episodes and the last 5 episodes will have very vague spoilers, because some stuff from episode 9 onward and some stuff from episode 1 onwards will be talked about. But it's mainly going to be the 3 episodes that cover Heian. Okay, let's get into it. I will start with the positives first. I know my Big O video I did the negative section first, but that was a different case. The thing right off the bat this arc excels at was the build-up. The reveal that the boys were going to the past was done in all subtle ways, but still felt natural. We have stuff like the OST being full of traditional Japanese instruments, and one of our main characters is Benkei Masashibo, who is a reference to the historical monk, while also being Masashi and Benkei fused together. It's a whole thing. And he also happens to hold the sword that Reiko Miyamoto used, which is foreshadowing to her actual appearance. But the biggest indicator is right in front of us, the Oni being the main villains. The Oni stand out the most, especially because they are the main reason why New isn't just a full-on reboot of the manga. If it was, the Dinosaur Empire would be here, but the Oni are way different from them. They instead are kind of like mindless zombies that infect others to become them, and their origins are shrouded in mystery for the entire show. But the fact we see them coming out of portals was hinting at the fact they are either from another universe or another place and time. And wouldn't you know it, they are everywhere in the past, albeit for a different reason we'll get into a little later. I think the last place to cap off how good the build-up is happens mostly in episode 5, where Michiru doing her research on the Oni happens to coincide with the boys fighting in the lake that she was looking into, revealing at the end that an entire ancient city that's not Atlantis was under the lake, and the portal showing up with Ryoma just going, fuck it, let's go through it, pretty much leads them to the past. It's all done so masterfully while being unexpected, as New's just the show that takes so many twists and turns that whatever your knowledge on Getter might be, you can't guess what direction it will take, which keeps us engaged with the show for the entire time. But how does the plot of this arc actually hold up? Well, despite being a very simple story of the trio needing to reunite, come together, and beat the new big bad they're introduced to, it serves as a really good middle arc because of how much more we go into the characters. The thing I will always praise New the most for is the fact of how character-driven it is. Everything is about the characters. The characters from their individual intro episodes were already a fantastic time. The chemistry between Ryoma, Hayato, and Benkei were shown off well, especially in episode 4. But this arc especially expands on Ryoma in ways that is a perfect bridge from the beginning episodes to where he finds himself at the end. Ryoma's general arc in New is about learning to value his teammates, with his one fatal flaw is that he's too stubborn to actually rely on others. Yet time and time again, we see that he needs his friends. Raiko tells him that plainly, but when he reunites with his group, it's clear that they did all miss each other, despite how ungrateful Ryoma has come off before. Ryoma being separated from his friends for only 2 episodes during this arc somehow brought them closer together. And with the events to follow after this arc, he begins to cherish them even more. He just won't admit it, and he won't actually let them help him. If you fucking know, you fucking know. Oh, and I know the animators were happy to have Ryoma fucking slicing things up with literal tomahawks, not in the getter. They fucking gave him tomahawks, and he gets a cool sword. This arc is just showing off who the staff's favorite was, and I mean, if I was working on the show, I honestly would have done the same thing. But, despite me being a self-proclaimed Ryoma fan, I'm gonna do my best to not make this spiral into a Ryoma video, because there are other characters to talk about, like Hayato. Hayato's arc also has a similar bridge thing here going on, except his motive is very different. It's easy to identify that Ryoma is the character whose actions drive the plot forward, but Hayato is the one who's engaging with Ryoma's actions and how we get more details out of the story. Compared to Ryoma, Hayato doesn't mind having other people around, which is fucking insane because this guy started off as a terrorist, but I digress. But what really keeps him around with these people is his fascination towards the Getter. He and Ryoma are specifically meant to be polar opposites, in any iteration really. I wouldn't call them rivals as they don't really fight besides their first encounter, but Hayato is someone who comes off as respecting Ryoma, or maybe at the very least finding him amusing, despite again how ungrateful Ryoma is, if only because Hayato doesn't want anyone to get in his way, and Ryoma actually respects that because he just wants to do his own thing. Earlier episodes characterize how Hayato's urge for knowledge will lead him to hack into computers in the lab or climb through the vents, Jesus Christ, to show how desperate he is for answers. And during this arc specifically, Hayato is clearly able to piece together fast that the Getter is the one causing the Oni to appear, and that Ryoma clearly brings out more power of the Getter by himself, as he and Benkei struggle to fight without him. Yet it only leads to more questions that Hayato is left to ponder for the rest of the show, as not everything that is revealed to him is answered, and he continues down this path before him, just wanting to know what the hell even is Getter Robo. We also get nice development here with him and Benkei, as they rarely talked in the prior episodes. We see Hayato also cares about him as he went to look for him. And until they can get back to the past, Benkei is the one person Hayato can share his thoughts with. Unfortunately, Benkei doesn't really understand any of the Getter stuff, so it's not any meaningful conversation. But still nice to see these two develop as friends. That Hayato isn't as cold as he seems, even if he will always remain that way in personality. I guess I can talk a little bit about Benkei, but I'll be keeping a lot of the things about him in the criticism section, sadly. But the one thing I can say about him is that he gives the most realistic reaction from being separated from his friends, as he's in shock to see that Hayato is still here, as he probably thought he was fucking dead. He was stuck in the past for the longest, so he deeply missed seeing his friends, and it's really sweet, honestly. Benkei as a whole really ties the dynamic together as a sane one who sees the good in people, as he's stuck with two of the most insane, morally gray motherfuckers ever. I say this arc is focused more on him and Hayato bonding, but the moments he and Ryoma get together towards the end are fun. Even if Ryoma fat shames him, which dude, what the fuck? That's not cool! Though given the show before and after this has plenty of Ryoma and Benkei moments, it really makes sense why this was more of him and Hayato's time together. But now that I talked about the main characters, I think it's worth talking about the characters that are introduced within this arc. Which I'll start with Raiko, as with all the build-up, I don't think anyone expected her to be a woman, especially because, the real Raiko was a man. Raiko is a really good supporting character. I talked about it a little bit in Ryoma's section, but the friendship that these two develop is fucking amazing. They start off having this genuine misunderstanding of her thinking Ryoma's an Oni, to Raiko realizing, wait, never mind, he's just a weird human, which leads her to immediately to be more friendly with him, which then develops into them having this friendly competition to see who can defeat Seimei first. As Ryoma just chooses to still work solo, despite the fact he gains a lot of respect for her. Though another nice character moment for Ryoma here is that Ryoma mainly cares about her soldiers not being sacrificed, as one of his morals is that he hates seeing unnecessary deaths. And he thinks he can handle it himself, which is why he declines going into her army. But Raiko already sees him as a friend and sees the potential he has when she gave him his sword and was reacting to him. What's also great about Raiko is while it's completely unrealistic for a woman in Heian, Japan to have this much power, the show does a great job spending enough time with her to show how strong and good of a leader she is. That even with all the men she loses, she refuses to go down without an honest fight. I do wish she got a proper fight that wasn't just her and Ryoma fucking around, but it's not her fault that Seimei is stupidly OP. Okay, so this last part can technically go into the criticism section, but in my honest opinion, I have a reason to defend this last part with Raiko. While the one unfortunate thing with her character is that she basically gets fridged, it's honestly one of the better use of fridging of women in the series, which the bar is fucking hell with that. Only because Raiko got enough time to develop her personality for us to care about her, and her killing herself just to give Ryoma another chance to fight back is such a noble way for her to go out. It's something that makes sense for her character, and it honestly makes Ryoma and Raiko never seeing each other again sadder than if she just lived and watched him leave. The fact that she is dead, the fact that this is another burden Ryoma has to carry is just sad, but it makes the moment where he fights back against Seimei all the more powerful. Of course, I'm not gonna blame anyone who finds this death lame. Again, it's still fridging. I think a general thing I can say about New is that I think they did respect women, that they were trying to say a message that women can still be as powerful as men despite society expectations. And I think Raiko, despite her death, really portrays this well. We'll get to you later though, Michiru. So for what she is, she's a decent female side character that's another great character that contrasts with Ryoma, who just maybe needed a few more things to be perfect, but there's a lot to like about her. Alright, now it's time to talk about Seimei. Okay, this is going to be very hard because Seimei has a lot of issues, but I'm putting him in the positive section because he's actually my favorite Getter villain. For the first villain to really talk in the show, as again, the Oni are just pretty mindless, he does a good job at least having a pretty strong personality. As Seimei is one of those villains that's mainly endearing to me for being that weird-ass fucking creature who is too egotistical for his own good. They do a good job at setting him up as powerful and intimidating, mainly because his powers are fucking bullshit, like what is this? But it does a good job at showing that he's a far different threat from the Oni, that even though he is the master of them technically, he is something else completely. It's unclear if he's even human, and honestly I like the fact it's never told if he is or not. In terms of his motives, Seimei has a pretty basic one that people may or may not find him boring for, but to me, I like him more for it. It is simply that he won't fight the Getter if Ryoma isn't around. This man does not give a fuck about Hayato and Benkei, as he just ends up sending one of his powerful Oni their way. He just wants the main character. And for me at least, I think that's just really interesting, to see a villain who's just so clearly obsessed with his goal, and yet he still fails miserably at it. I think his characterization is absolutely his strongest points, and the episodes do a really good job at selling it. So even if his motive might be boring to some people, I think he does a good job at being pretty entertaining. If only it's just really funny to see a villain just fuck around with Ryoma so casually and Ryoma just wants to throw hands with him but just fails at it. I don't know, it's just really amusing to me. Oh, and some quick fun fact trivia here. The funniest yet coolest part about Seimei and Raikou is that they are technically not Getter characters. They are from a different manga the creator Ken Ishikawa made called, I'm probably gonna butcher this, Kyomyo Senkai, and while not everyone is a fan of this crossover stuff, I think New does a really good job at making it feel like a natural part of the story. Granted, I'm kind of used to old anime doing this because Go Nagai stuff in Dynamic Pro just have a lot of crossovers or just references to a lot of his niche works, so Ken doing this stuff with Getter isn't a shock, but I just appreciate that it doesn't make people feel lost. Especially because for us English fans, Kyomyo Senkai is still not fully fucking translated. So I sung most of the writing praises here, but before I really wrap up the positives, I really want to talk about the aesthetics of New Getter real quick. I wanted to talk about this in my general review, and I think this is still a good place to talk about it. Because, here's my hottest take. Why the fuck do people say this show looks bad? I don't get it. I'm not even saying this to be spiteful towards Getter Robo Arc, because I mean, we all know that just had no budget, but everything else about it is fine. I just never really understood the hate for New Getter, especially when people talked about the art style. It is the anime that leaned the closest to Ishikawa's art style until Arc, and one of the reasons it just worked better than that is because it made sure to change aspects of his style. It didn't keep those weird-ass proportions, but even without the knowledge of how well it just translates Ishikawa's style, I don't think there's an anime that ever looked like this or ever will look like this again. It may not always be on model, but like, are we gonna pretend Armageddon is on model? Because they sure as fuck didn't know how to draw Hayato half the time. Which I can't say was ever a problem for new Hayato, funnily enough. I also see way too many people complain the animation is stiff, and I just never got that either. Because this show still has incredibly smooth animation, and this arc highlights that perfectly. I will say episode 1 and episode 13, being the beginning and end respectively, did probably have the overall best animation in the show. You still get a lot of diverse fights during this part. Sure, it's mostly hand-to-hand ones, but the mecha fights are serviceable for what they are. Especially because we get a lot of creative fights. One of my favorite little aspects of New is the fact it really leans into the karate aspect of Ryoma, that he doesn't want to use swords to fight against Raikou because he prefers to use his fist, but then he uses a sword later because Raikou gives it to him to fight Oni. That little stuff I love. But then we also have Hayato and Benkei fighting alone in Getter 2, which leads to Hayato having to rely on Getter 1's tomahawk that happened to be lying around, and he manages to win despite this. They managed to win despite not having all 3 pilots, and that's so fucking sick. There's just a lot of cool ideas for fights here, and most of them are just really well executed. This show also just has a lot of pretty backgrounds. I doubt this was accurate to ancient Japan, but god, this setting just is so cool. These backgrounds are fucking beautiful. And I would also love to talk about the OST, but it's unfortunately copyrighted, so... New did an overall fantastic job at selling the ancient Japan aesthetic. It made a pretty simple arc that developed the characters more. But for all the good this arc did, we now have to go into the ugly side of things. So as this section implies, we're gonna talk about the criticism, because as good as the show is, it has its own pitfalls. I think the root of the issue I can begin to talk about with Heian is simply its length. Now I want to make this clear. I'm sort of tired of sometimes seeing this criticism that 13-12 episode shows are written off as being way too short to do everything, when 12-13 is an actual length that can work. I think the simple rule of 12 to 13 episode stuff is that 1, the pacing needs to be good, because fast pacing is easy to fuck up, and 2, it needs to not cram in too many characters, too many plot points. It needs to be condensed enough to let its plot breathe. And I think if we compare the 3 13-episode Getter animes we got, New is the best one, because Armageddon's issue was it just didn't have enough time to answer everything, and Arc's issue was the pacing was not good, that it felt like things were being elongated, which it was. I think New not having production issues and just not being a full-on adaptation really let itself have whatever structure it wanted, and it worked. However, this arc being 3 episodes is just a very confusing choice. I will say, eps 1 to 5 and eps 9 to 13, in terms of their pacing, are fucking phenomenal. So if Heian was extended, either happened at episode 5 or happened in episode 9, I feel like it would have harmed either one of those arcs. But I still feel like if done right, there could have been a better way to let this arc breathe, because a lot of the ideas are simply unexplored, or there's a lot of missed opportunities. The biggest one has to be the setting itself. Episode 6 is the only episode where we get to take in the setting, to explore it a little bit, and the rest is just moving along, and there are so many things they mention here that is never elaborated on again. A major one being that the people in the past assumed the getter was an Oni, yet no character ever brings this up. Not even Raiko when she clearly sees Ryoma fighting inside of it, because to them they probably think it is an Oni. And there's just a lot of similarities between the giant Oni and the getter and just how the Oni are attracted to the getter, but it just wasn't touched on at all here. We are also told that the getter being here caused some early technological advancements. The Heian people created guns this early. They have blimps that they can fly in, which is so cool, yet it doesn't seem like it affects the present when the boys get back. Which, sure, you could say the technology got lost, but because of when they get to the present, and at least 3 entire years have passed, but the only thing that changed was Saotomei's lab got fucking upgraded with, like, missiles, it is a little disappointing that the future wasn't slightly altered. That they could have done something where it's still the same present they were in, but being in the past did change stuff. But it really didn't, besides Michiru and Seimei getting older. Oh, and the getter just gets a new reactor core, I guess. This just highlights probably the biggest issue of Heian, and honestly kind of the saddest part of it. It doesn't affect the story that much long term. It was just there to be a reason as to why New isn't a full-on adaptation of the early manga, and to pave the way for the time skip to happen in the present. Yet any other plot point could have justified the reactor, justified Ryoma going to the future in episode 9, especially given it's based on events of the Shin manga where there wasn't that much time travel, and it wouldn't have made a difference. It's also just a giant shame because I love the idea of like New trying to do this past and future thing, that the getter can change any point of time depending on where it ends up, but it just doesn't feel like it works because the future is only explored in 1 episode, and yet somehow it just affects the story more. But now we need to talk about some of the other character stuff. Even though I do think overall the character writing in this show is strong, it's nowhere near perfect. And the first example I can think of is a character I didn't even touch that much at all. Michiru. Oh, Michiru. Ugh. I really don't want to be too harsh on new Michiru, as I've seen a lot of people like her, especially women, and I understand why. She is probably the most interesting take on Michiru since Toei, not falling under the typical happy-go-lucky support girl type. She instead has this very mature and slightly cold personality to her. She's a researcher looking into the Oni, and she sort of becomes more of the professor than Seimei. It feels like the writers were aware that Michiru hasn't been used really well over the course of this franchise, but then they decided to have an entire arc where she only appears once for like a minute. Why? I understand that her going to the past with the boys wouldn't make any sense. I'm fine with her staying in the present. The fact we got Raiko out of it makes up for her absence, and it was a good thing. But would it really be so hard to just dedicate some time, just like 1 minute every episode to see what she was doing? Like, I don't also like how this was hiding up to the fact that, oh, they jumped forward in the future, guys, we see her again and she's older, wow, it's because that doesn't really develop her more, especially because she's honestly acts the same, just a little nicer, I guess, but that's also because the boys have been fucking gone so long that she probably thought they were dead. And I hate to criticize this so deeply because I still like how the final few episodes used her character, but it's just undeniable. Early episode Michiru was better. She just had more to do. She had more spotlight on her, despite the fact they were still juggling 3 main characters, and it's just really disappointing that they were pushing her to be more important, but she just didn't get a lot to do. kinda reminds me of a certain someone else. Okay, we're talking about Benkei now. Now, I want to say I really do love his character. As established earlier, he has a great personality that works with his teammates. The idea of merging Masashi and Benkei is an interesting one instead of just choosing one of them. I like how he's a monk, even if he looks a lot like Baku, and that's a little confusing. I just like how Ken was trying to lead more into the clear Buddhism stuff going on in Getter, and I especially really like the fact he's a bit of a subversion of Getter 3 pilots. Not only does he, fully have this moment where he goes against the Getter, but he doesn't, fucking die compared to Guy in the manga. But as great as all that stuff is towards the end of New, the problem is he has no character arc whatsoever, and Heian would have been the perfect time for it. But they didn't do that. It is so odd to me that Benkei follows the trend of being based on a historical figure like Raiko and Seimei, yet he is so not important to the Heian story whatsoever, besides having Raiko's sword. Which, by the way, he doesn't even get to use, as it's given to Ryoma instead. Sure, Ryoma and Raiko were more closer, but why the fuck would you give Benkei the sword if he wasn't gonna use it to begin with? And it also sucks how, again, Benkei was in the past for the longest time. There could have been more stuff played around with that, but no, instead he got with this random fucking woman, and that's where he's been the past 2 years. I get it, he's horny. I don't mind his horny bits, compared to other animes, it's done really funny. But just having his entire character spend time with a woman who doesn't even like him, come on, why'd you have to make him a joke? I don't like that. It just sucks that Benkei got no time to himself, really. This would have been the perfect time for it, but they just didn't give him that. I really don't know why Getter as a whole has just been struggling to use its 3 pilots. It's always the Getter 3 pilots that get shafted. This has been an issue that only Toei has resolved, but I really don't think it's hard to balance 3 main characters in 13 episodes. It's really not, but it's always the Getter 3 pilots getting the short end of the stick, and I don't know if I'm any better for being the Ryoma fan. Also, before I go into this last character section, I'm not actually going to talk about Seimei here, not because I think he's bad and shouldn't be brought up at all. He's used really well in New, actually. It's just because he's not involved in Heian, I don't feel like bringing him up. So now, we get to talk about Seimei again, and he just kinda ties to the biggest issue with New as a whole. I know I said that a lot, but really this is its biggest issue. The villains are just not written as well as they could be. I pretty much glossed over this when talking about Seimei because I was focusing on his good traits. But the one thing that people are going to instantly notice about his introduction is that it took episode 6 to show up. Episode 6 in a 13-episode show where the main villain just now shows up. I'm sorry, you can't do that with a show this length. It only works if a show is slightly longer, where you can introduce more major big bads. You can't even use the excuse of oh, he's stuck in the past, because when they get back at the end of episode 9, he's already fucking there again. He can time travel. If he can literally summon the Onis from different places, he can fucking time travel. They could have had Seimei show up early. If anything, it could have improved episode 5 by Seimei already being there and luring them to the past. We didn't have to have him be revealed like this. He could have been introduced a couple episodes earlier, and it could have been fine. It's just really frustrating because, like I said, Seimei has a good personality. His motives are basic, but they could have been improved upon if he was developed more. Him having a death fake out especially could have improved him more. But you know what they fucking do? After they reveal he can time travel and he's just in the present fucking shit up, he dies and gets replaced by different villains. Why the fuck did they do this? It doesn't feel like New has a consistent threat. Also, we just don't know what the fuck the Onis are, and as much as I like the vagueness that Getter has, especially this show has as a whole, and as I said before, I don't care if we don't know if Seimei is a human or not, I still don't know what the fuck the Onis are, and I feel like that's also a problem too. I feel like these villains are barely connected, and that's just not a good thing. And yeah, to be the arc in the past, where we see more of the Oni, where we learn Seimei just controls them, these answers should have been more clear. You didn't have to outright answer them, but you could have gave us some more clear ideas of what you were alluding to, and it's just not that. But just overall, even if there were a lot of issues with this arc, I still love it, and I still love New Getter Robo. I think we can wrap things up now. So I think me saying my Lyuze Cashroom Sins video was going to be the longest video on my channel is immediately outdated. I don't know how this video is going to turn out. I don't think it's as messy as it was before, if only helped by the fact that, like, holy shit, I'm not reviewing the entire show. If I was, this would be a fucking nightmare. But there was definitely things I could have done better here. I just really needed to talk about New Getter in some way, shape, or form. I fucking love this show, and it just makes me sad it's just overlooked by English fans. Of course, I'm not gonna complain, it's the most underrated thing ever, because people who like Toei or just any spin-off manga is suffering more than me. I have that self-awareness. I just find it weird that New Getter is not mentioned a lot. I think some of my frustration with that just comes out of the fact of, like, I think New is the perfect place to start someone if they aren't gonna read the manga. Sure, it spoils things, but it gives you a good idea of what to expect while also just being its own thing. If you don't want to look at any more stuff, it's a fine enough self-contained story, and I think that's a good thing. That it can cater to new people, maybe be their entry point, but also just be something that was made for the fans. You don't get a lot of stuff like this that can balance both things. You can just tell that this thing was made with passion. Though I will say I probably will talk about New Getter again at some point. Maybe not in a solo video, but there is an overall video I plan to do covering different parts of Ryoma, different iterations of him, and I do think I should talk about the later episode stuff with Ryoma, because god, it honestly is my favorite part of the show. As much as I covered this arc, the last few episodes with Ryoma really stuck with me in good and bad ways, funnily enough. But I just wanted to focus on something more cohesive, because I don't think it would be possible just to talk about the beginning or just talk about the ending. The middle is just weirdly something you can mention, because it gives people a good idea of where things started off, where things are going to go, but also not spoil everything. I think I did that part well overall. Pretty much the goal of all of my videos is just to get people interested in what the fuck I'm talking about, even if I don't do the best job at probably explaining everything. If I can just get someone to watch New Getter, doesn't matter if they've seen any version of Getter before, I just hope I can do that. I just really love this fucking anime, and I am glad I could do something for it. It's a shame I couldn't properly review it, but I mean, this is close enough, and I'm happy to do that.